record. Okay. And the first thing I'll do is can I just get you to introduce yourself? So.
Yes.
My name's Alan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. My name's Alan Edward Ranger. I was born in Coventry on the 16th of April 1933 in the district of Camden of Coventry. I think it was about 2 or 3 years later we moved to my grandfather's house. His daughters, there were 3 daughters, had left home, got married. He had retired. Someone had got to look after him, so father decided to move there. We moved to Fosel, and in actual fact we were in an industrial area, but at the end of the road was Courtauls, nylon synthetic fibres, at times making quite a smell, but to me it sounded very interesting, although I was only down there. But at the end of the road was this huge chimney. In fact, Courtauls had 3 large chimneys, and this funny smell, years later, I found out was carbon disulfide. But anyway, the house that we lived in backed on to the sports ground of Courtauls, and a very nice cricket ground. In fact, twice a year there used to be the county match, so quite a good standard. Anyway, it came to school, and I lived in Guild Road, and when you actually think about it, the school was called Pridmore Road, but adjacent to it was Guild Road, and the school was split up into infants and juniors, a large playground, and the senior school. And we lived diagonally opposite the senior school. So 1938, I went into the infants. Miss Itch was the teacher, very nice. In the second year, Miss Simpson, and Miss Simpson was into fractions and decimals, and I got a bit uncomfortable. But because it was 39, we had quite a bit of interruption. Obviously the council were aware that the school was very close to industry, and they built us air raid shelters. So we had this business of going 2 by 2 up the road to the shelters. I can still now smell the smell of the cement of these damp shelters. And of course we had our gas masks on in the little cardboard box.
Okay, that's good. Now, before we do anything else,
and sisters and anything.
Sorry, before we do anything else, I'm just going to turn my phone off.
Yeah.
Always the most embarrassing thing when the sound man's phone goes off on these things.
Earliest. Well, you've done some of your earliest memoirs, haven't you? So, just trying to think. Hobbies. What? I mean, you already mentioned chemistry. What turned you on? When did you find out? How did you find out? Well, it couldn't have been the smell of carbon dioxide. That's awful.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you want to expand on that a bit, and actually, what would be interesting is to run into the, like you were saying before about you were interested in chemistry, you want to do chemistry. But
oh yes.
You got divert. If you run into that. Yeah, that'd be interesting. Okay.
But it came 1940, and my father actually worked in Nuneaton here and travelled by train from Coventry to Nuneaton, and the occasional bomb was dropped, and he was getting home quite late, so we actually moved to Nuneaton, and we were there something like 5 months. But it was while we were there that Coventry Centre was destroyed in what was known as the Coventry Blitz on the 14th of November 1940. And where we were in Nuneaton, we looked out of the bedroom windows and could see the whole of Coventry alight, orange and red sky, unbelievable. Well, in the meantime, my parents were looking for a house in Nuneaton, and as the bombers obviously came to Coventry, turned to go back to Germany, the odd bomb dropped in Nuneaton, and oh dear, the road where they were going to have a house had bombs, so they decided we might as well go back to Coventry. And quite a mistake, because in April 41, the enemy went for the factories, and we were, as I say, surrounded. There were Daimler not far away, obviously Courtauld, the Riley Works, Alfred Herbert's, the tool room makers, sorry, the tool makers company. And we were unfortunate that a bomb dropped next door. Of all the nights that we used to go to shelters, this night we didn't go. And the bomb, there was a stick of 4 bombs. The house next door, and next door but one, their kitchen disappeared. Opposite, the Cook family, Mr. and Mrs. Cook and their daughter Sheila, were killed. There was another, of course there was tending to have these terrace houses, street, almost street after street. And another 2 lots of houses were destroyed. So the council actually moved us to Radford. But I did not like the Radford school. I still wanted to go to Pridmore Road, so I walked there and back each day, which was 2 miles each way, and gradually went into the juniors, passed what was called the scholarship, they later called it the 11 plus, and I went to King Henry VIII Grammar School, where I had a very pleasant 5 years. But it was in the 3rd form, of course, being a grammar school, the languages we did was Latin and French. But when it came to the 3rd form, you did a year of Greek. It comes the 4th year, and you had to choose as to what we were going to do. There was either the classics, the modern languages, the science, or the maths. But the headmaster dictated that I should go into classics. It doesn't appear as though I did very well in what shall we call general science, I don't know. But after a term I was really upset and asked my father to go up and see the headmaster to have a change. And they said, right, well, he's all right at languages, he can go and do modern. So I dropped Greek and did German. Well, the arrangement was that for matriculation you had to have a science, and it turned out that the classics did biology, the maths did physics, and the Germans did chemistry. And obviously the science form did all 3. So I got a real interest in the chemistry because someone who lived in the road actually worked at Courtauld in the laboratory. They were, although they were doing the nylon, they also did the chemical engineering. And I suppose talking to him, I think he was working in, there's obviously the control laboratory, but there were also the research laboratories 1 and 2, and I think he was in number 1 laboratory, and they were going in for a fibre called fibrillane, which went into carpet making later. So I was really taken up with the chemistry, and there was a friend called Ivan Scott, and he and I started spending our pocket money on buying glass apparatus, and of course my mother was quite upset, we're not having those chemicals in here. So we went to Grandad's allotment, which was 1/8 of an acre, in a very large shed, and there we played.
Oh, sorry. I'll tell you what. Hold that thought. I'm just going to go get the money.
Yeah.
Okay, a second. Okay.
Obviously, we were trying to make fireworks. At the time, flying imps were the thing. We had got old packets of the fireworks, and we were stuffing them stuff in and lighting the fuse and all this sort of thing. Because it came the 5th form and school certificate, when the results came through, because the school Old Boys Association had seen that all those who were leaving had got interviews, and so I went to Court Halls, had the interview, and he just said, "I'm sorry, you haven't done physics. You know, if you go and get school, of course, school certificate by this time was changing to O level. If you go and do a course in physics and you come back, you know, you might be suitable. But if you've just done chemistry, I suggest you go to an appointment at the chemical works, which was known as Wiley's, which was almost in the centre of Coventry. And it was a pharmaceutical chemist, wholesale and manufacturing. So I got an interview, and they were pleased to have me. I actually saw Gordon Porter. He was the chief pharmacist, and I said yes, I was prepared to do a 5-year apprenticeship, starting at £1.06 a week. I mean, this wasn't odd to my father, because grandfather had been a coppersmith, father was a tinsmith, and he'd done a 7-year apprenticeship in Coventry, so for me to go and do an apprenticeship to him would seem the natural thing to do. So in August 49, I started work. I think I had about 2 days with Porter in his laboratory, and they'd planned where I should start. And for the first 6 months, I went to the aseptic room. Odd that there was an old boy in there waiting to go off to college to do what was then known as the MPS, Member of the Pharmaceutical Society. Stuart Puckett, very nice fellow. So what did they do in the aseptic room? Well, they made up ampoules with morphine in. This was either quarter grain, half grain, 1 grain. Obviously it was for people with cancer. And of course you put it in a glass, what was known as an ampoule, and they were sterilised at 100 degrees centigrade for half an hour. On the other hand, we did have, the business also did veterinary preparations, and one that I always think of, sodium borogluconate, sort of a 10-ounce bottle. These were actually autoclaved, some pressure or other. And then there was various ointments that penicillin were added to. And the time went really quick in this aseptic room, and Porter decided that I should have 6 months in the laboratory. Now, I really enjoyed this. This was analysing incoming goods and analysing outgoing goods. The manufacturing department, would you mind if I just had a look? Sorry.
I'll stop recording for a second.
Yeah, sorry.
No, start again. And you can pick up from saying in the laboratory.
In the laboratory, as I say, analysing outgoing products, all these mixtures, tinctures, linctus, they were all to either the National Formula book or to the British Pharmacopoeia, or to the British Pharmacopoeia Codex. And obviously they listed down what their weight per mil should be, or what their morphine content should be. Linked to codeine, linked to ciliopiat. These were quite common cough mixtures. But as well as that, Wiley's had their own proprietary medicines. They didn't sell them in bulk, but such as the Hartford Hill, which was for those with tuberculosis, there was a special preparation for them. And this was done, shall we say, rather than making up 50 gallons or 100 gallons, they only made up enough for 24 Winchesters. But these samples were coming into the lab all the time, and as I say, you carried out according to what Mr. Porter told us to do. There was another assistant in there. He was actually, of course I must say that with the apprenticeship there was one day at college and 2 nights at college, obviously, to do the subjects, and I'd taken up, as you were aware, I had to do physics, biology at O level, whereas I was doing chemistry at A level. After 6 months in the laboratory, I went into manufacturing. I think I had something like 2 months on ointments, unguentums, and then had a month in the mill. This is where raw material was powdered up. We all probably as a child had licorice wood. Well, of course, this sacks of wood would come in and it had to go in the disintegrator and come out as a fine powder. And of course, you'd come out of the mill and you were sometimes Snow White. The big rolling mills go in. But it just, gave you some idea. And of course, the other thing was making drenches. These were powders which the farms used for when sheep are dipped and that sort of thing. They always put in some chemicals or other. From there I went into the tincture room, and then there was, of course, in the tincture, tincture of morphine. This is where you actually got the opium poppies that came in what we used to call biscuit tins, and these would have to be extracted, and we had these huge copper pans with probably 8 foot diameter. In went the horrible black mass. I don't know whether you've ever seen the raw poppies as they come in. But of course these were boiled up with water and then extracts carried out. So all quite interesting. And then I went into the poison room, and I was in there probably 6. And while I was in there, the man in charge left, and of course the poison room was locked, and inside was another room where the dangerous drugs were kept, morphine, cocaine, dimorphine. And this was something that I didn't have a clue about, is that there's always the police coming in to check how much dangerous drugs you have, where does it go? Obviously some goes to manufacture, but it's also supplied to the local pharmacies, so you have to keep a register. So suddenly I was finding what I'd done. In a way it was dispensing. It used to come down, the orders for the day, and you'd make the different things up or fill bottles, and of course it was entered in the register. But what the police were doing, they would come in, check hello, the manufacturing had 10 ounces of so-and-so. Where did it go? How much actually went up to the packing department? How many Winchesters? You know, just to follow it through. And then they'd take the name of chemists which had been supplied, and off they went. So even this, you see, in 1951, drugs, something I'd never thought about. You know, there's people having these odd things, but they, as I say, police were onto it even in 51. Well, I'd have obviously had deferment to finish the end of my college year, and this letter came from Birmingham University Recruiting Board to say that I would be required to do national service. It just seemed odd, because when I was in the army I found that there was a lot of fellas aged 21 who'd done a 5-year apprenticeship in carpentry or electrician or something like that, and they'd actually finished their apprenticeship, but for some unknown reason, apprentices before me and apprentices after me did their national service, and the company accepted that that 2 years in national service counted as your as your apprenticeship. So I went in the army, Royal Signals, Royal Corps of Signals, Catterick Camp, report on the 16th of December 1951. What a shock. I can always remember it was a full moon, and we were up at 5:30 in the dark. We'd gone to ablutions and all that sort of thing, and we were queuing to go into the mess, and there was this moon shining away, and of course it, you know, I don't know whether either of you have been in the forces, but we had to obviously do the drill and do aptitude tests and that sort of thing. And when I went before the career officer, he said, "So what trade do you think you would like to do?" And the Royal Signals had C, B and A trades, A being the top grade, paying the most money. I said, "I don't want to be in the Royal Signals." I said, "I'm in Civilian Street, I'm in pharmacy, I'd like to go into the medical corps." And he said, "And do you think you'll be dispensing medicines in the army?" He said, "You've got to have a rank, you've got to be a staff sergeant to do that." He said, "If you go into the medical corps, you'll be emptying bedpans, you know, and things like that." He said, "You've got to use your education for the army's purpose." So he looked down and he said, "Oh, I see you've done French and German. Yeah, I'll see about it. Well, you think about, you know, you've got to think of an A trade," which was a mechanic, of course. So we had Christmas. It was very unusual. I'd only been in the army 3 weeks and I was home on leave. Christmas Day and Boxing Day. And when I went back, I was on OC's orders. Good heavens. Reported. Left, right, hop, salute, you know, stood there, stand at ease. "You're being posted to the intelligence corps." Oh, gosh. We'll be doing field, MI1, field security. So on the train I went down to Maresfield, which is just outside Uckfield in Sussex. Well, whereas I'd had a bed with a box underneath called the box soldier, where your kit went, and of course we were in a barrack room with 40 in the barrack room, I was suddenly in a room with 4 fellas, and we each had a wardrobe. This was a vast change, and you probably don't know, but the Intelligence Corps badge is the Tudor rose resting on laurel leaves, okay, but from a distance it was called a pansy, you know, a pansy resting on laurel leaves. So it turned out to be a 4-month course. There was an intake of 40, and something like a fortnight later another intake of 40, and people were dropping out all the way along. But eventually we landed up with 40 people taking the final 2 weeks course, and that's when they found I wasn't really all that intelligent. We had an exercise in Norfolk near Thetford, and of course one was the enemy and one was the home boys, and I ended up interviewing a load of refugees, and it looks as though I let a couple of spies through, you know, and of the 40, only 18 were accepted. So you can see 18 out of 80, they were looking for a certain person, really. I think they said I was a bit gullible. Obviously, if I let a couple of spies through. So I was RTU'd, I was quite disappointed, returned to unit. And when I got back to Catterick, there was this career. Did you have a good time? Oh yes, very, very nice. I mean, you were the intelligence. You were actually with regiments. You were at that stage. When you passed out, you were a corporal. But in that time, I'd actually been on a assault course, worked ourselves up to do a 25-mile route march and things like that. In fact, when I was on the one of the assault courses, there was this Scottish, he was in the Black Watch, he was our corporal, and he saw the flag flying at half-mast at the gatehouse, and he said to someone, "Laddie, what's all that about?" Of course, it comes back to say that the king had died. Oh dear, he was shocked, you know, and back to the barrack room, you know, we had the rest of the afternoon off. But there you see, I was in, and I served under 2 monarchs. Not many people do that. Anyway, back to Catterick, and I was destined to go to 1TR and become a radio mechanic. It turned out to be 10 weeks of theory, a week leave, 10 weeks of practice. And when I passed out, A3 mechanic, I was posted to Oakhanger, and I thought, oh, off to Germany, this is great. I hadn't realised Oakhanger was in Hampshire. I went to War Office number 2 Signals Regiment, and the HQ was at Droitwich. You probably know Droitwich, where the BBC transmitted from and all that sort of thing. But we, in actual fact, although that was our HQ, our transmitting station was at Pirbright, near Aldershot, and 20 miles away was our receiving station, and I was destined to be at the receiving station. So by the time I got there, 10 months of my 2-year stint had gone by, and I'd been in the classroom quite a lot, really. Anyway, having settled, I think it coincided. While I was in the Coventry Technical College doing the pharmacy, we did have, I think there were 2 fellas from the RAF and 1 Army in the class, you see. So I thought, wonder if they do anything. So I asked to go on OC's orders, and he said, "So what do you want to do?" And I said, "I wondered if it'd be possible to go to a technical college 1 day a week. I've seen this happen in Coventry." "Well, what do you want to do?" And I said, "I'm weak on physics and maths," because I wanted to do calculus. And he said, oh, you're just the sort of person I want. He said, we have regular soldiers here, and there's a system whereby if you become a corporal and you become A2, you go up a grade from A3 to A2, you can go on a 2-year course at Catterick, pass out as a foreman of signals, that's a staff sergeant, and after a few years you can go up and be a captain, technical captain. He said, now we've got these regulars coming to do an A2 course. He said, you'll have theory during the day, you'll have practice, and for the maths you'll have a sergeant come from the education corps. So he said, how would that suit you, rather than going off to a technical college? And I said, yes, that'd be fine. Good. He said, well, I think it'll start in about 2 months' time. I must say that Oakhanger, it only had something like 40 staff there, and what we were actually doing, we were receiving communication from the Far East via Nairobi. And of course the Korean War was on and it was quite busy. And what it turned out to be, the station, when you think of an aerial, you're probably aware that they're shaped like diamonds, but they're on the top of 100-foot masts. And of course the area around was marshy. This is to attract the signals coming down to ground. And what one set consisted of was 3 aerials. So you had 3 receivers, you had an adapter, and as the signals came in, the adapter picked out the strongest signal from the aerial. So of course you can imagine all these aerials covered many acres. So I got involved in erecting an aerial, like 3 large cigars, you imagine, that were hauled up. Very interesting. Found out that the radio receivers required a monthly check, a quarterly check, and the operators actually worked 3 8-hour shifts, so it was going 24 hours a day. And of course, there they would be, the operators with their headphones on, poking into the set, you know, listening and whatnot, pulling out. So a lot of these cords being pulled was forever soldering on the end. But I found it quite interesting. The 2 months went by. These regulars with their 2 stripes up and whatnot came in. I think in all there was about 8 and 2 national service. So we did the course and I became A2. And then Major Mackay, I keep saying Mackay, very similar to that. He was a bit of a fatherly figure, and he had me on OC's orders and said, we're sending you up to Droitwich, you're going to do a drill and duty course. So off I went and I came back a Lance Corporal. As I say, there was only 40, and the officers were at Pirbright. The sergeants who ran our camp were all married, and they actually lived in Borden. So at night there was only the corporals running the camp, and with it being small in numbers, I found I was on guard about every 5th night as guard commander. But it suited me because the major, we had no naffy. So with only 40 men, you couldn't have a naffy. So we had a shop and we sold toiletries, cigarettes, different things like that, sweets, and I was a bit cheeky, I suppose. But down the lane, right down the lane, was a pub. I can't think of its name now, that sold courage. Of course, the lads used to say, you've got to have courage to drink it, you know. Anyway, I went down there and had a word with the publican, and I said, would you mind if the lads had bottled beer? They enjoy draft better, but when they're up there when I say on duty, they were on standby, it would be nice if they could have, you know, a bottle of beer or so. So that is what happened, and I became in charge of this shop. And it was very, of course, pay wasn't all that good, and we were paid on a Thursday, and as a rule they were broke by, especially if they went home on a 36 or a 48. So tick was the answer. Okay, you had to go on tick. I had this little list, so of course I always ensured that on a Wednesday night I was guard commander, and I totted up all these 1 and 2pence, 2 and 4, you know, and things like that. So my time finished, and I was posted to AER, my initials, Army Emergency Reserve, and I had the shock of my life when 2 months later a letter came through to say that I'd been transferred to the TA. I would report at Hall Green in Birmingham, and I'd got to do another 60 days, spread out over 5 years, which I did. In actual fact, I did, we were playing atomic warfare, erecting aerials and getting through. We did, I did 2 weeks again in the Norfolk area and 2 weeks in the Ruhr Valley near Dusseldorf. So I did get to Germany in the end.
You got there in the end.
So going back, I went back, I was demobbed on the 6th of December 53, and a week later I went into Wiley's to say that I'd finish off my apprenticeship, and I had a shock. The company had been taken over by Stafford Allens of London, and it had more or less become a warehouse for their products. On the other hand, they were still doing their proprietary medicines. So I went, it was upstairs, manufacturing had gone completely. I went upstairs where I got involved in tablet making, which was quite, I mean, the tablets just used to come out, but you've got to set up the machinery and obviously the powders to do it. And there was also suppositories and pessaries. This was a bit of a laugh. The pessaries also included contraceptives, where you use lactic acid to kill the sperm. You know, quite interesting. And the dispensary. So would it be 8 months passed by, and I was rewarded by an increase to £5 a week. Well, by Christmas I was complaining, and so it went up to £5, 10 shilling. I wasn't at all happy because I'd earned more than this in the army. What was I going to do about the pharmacy? Manufacturing had gone. Now, Stuart Puckett, who was there when I first started, he'd qualified and was actually working as a pharmacist in a shop. It wasn't his shop. He was really acting as a locum, I suppose. But I went to see him and I said, I want to work on a Saturday if possible. I'm not interested in money, but I wanted to know how to read doctor's prescriptions, see what you actually do. And he said, yes, come along, you know, no problem. Of course, what had happened, I was doing a 46-hour week at Wiley's, but when I came out of the army, it had dropped to 42 hours, because initially it was a 6-day week, 5 days, and then Saturday morning 8 till 12 o'clock. So coming out, Saturday was no longer working, although I did overtime on a Saturday morning. But I went to Stu Puckett's pharmacy shop and saw what happened. Well, it was great. People coming out from doctor's surgery and making up the prescription, but by midday it had gone quiet. So what did you do? And of course I was amused to see that in the chemist shop there were these mixtures that I'd made, 1 to 4, and all they were doing, diluting them down, either 1 to 4, 1 to 7 or what have you. And the afternoon was quiet until we got, well, obviously there were ladies coming in for cosmetics, sanitary towels, that sort of thing. And men, at 4:30, you'd have quite a load of men coming in for their condoms and that sort of thing. And I thought, do I really want to do this? Oh dear. So I started looking in the paper, and there was an advert, because I could go to Courtaulds any time. I mean, the class attending, 90% in the chemistry were Courtaulds people. So I had an interview with Courtaulds, and then this advert was for a large engineering firm requires laboratory technicians for rocket work. Oh, what is this? So I went and had an interview. Dr. Taylor had set up this rocket laboratory, but something happened on the day that I went for the interview. He wasn't there. So I was interviewed by the chief metallurgist, Charles Dalton. And of course we were waiting for Taylor to come and interview me, and he apparently shot off to whether he went to Westcott or somewhere, I don't know. But Dalton got this message that could he interview. I think there were about 3 of us for an interview. So I chatted to him, told him all about Wiley's and that sort of thing. And oh dear, 3 weeks went by, I didn't hear from him. And then when the letter did come, I was employed. And I had to report. The interview, by the way, had been carried out at Parkside, Armstrong Siddeley Motors, Parkside, because the laboratory at Anstey, where the rockets were being made and tested, the laboratory wasn't ready. They were knocking down, refurbishing buildings that had been used to house the Air Training Corps. Anstey, just before the war and during the war, had training pilots and navigators, and it was the Air Training Corps, that's it. So they'd had their cell blocks. I mean, obviously pilots, well, they had their own room, they weren't in a barrack room, and so these partition walls were being demolished to make way for the B block that went in. Turned out to be the hydraulic lab on the ground floor, and on the top floor the chemistry laboratory and the electrodynamics laboratory. So I reported, there was a bus service from Parkside to Anstey. Anstey was about 8 miles northeast of Coventry, out in the field, very nice, very pleasant. So I went out, and as I say, the laboratory furniture hadn't been arrived, and you know, I acquainted myself with Dr. Taylor, and he said that I would be working in the Parkside laboratory in the experimental plating laboratory. At the present time, they were working on the screamer, which used liquid oxygen and kerosene as propellants. And they had a bit of a problem with some aluminium component, and whereas it was anodized, it wanted deep anodizing. Of course, I knew nothing really about electroplating. So, as I say, there's a bus every hour from Parkside to Anstey, Anstey to Parkside. So he took me back to Parkside, and I was introduced to Zygmunt Raut, who was the manager of the chemistry laboratory. Zygmunt was a Polish refugee that had gone to Armstrong Siddeley in about 1940, I think it was. Very pleasant fellow, quite a deep voice and very authoritative in his manner, and he allocated this space. There was already one of his technicians working on deep anodizing, and what it was actually anodizing at something like 5 degrees centigrade, so the bath had to be cooled, and it was found quite convenient that you set the job on at about 5 o'clock, and it went through the night, and you got in at 8 o'clock in the morning, and of course it was test pieces and then this particular component. So that was the first job I got involved in, and then it came along that we were going to have a contract to build a gamma rocket engine.
Have you got a year for that, Alan?
Sorry?
Have you got a year for that?
Yes, this was 1955.
Can I
Okay.
get you to say that to me? Can I just say?
Oh yes, sorry.
About 1955.
Yeah.
You know, we
No,
we're going to
yeah,
build a gap.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes, it was March 1955 that I started in the Armstrong Siddeley laboratory at number 3 gate. Taylor informed me that this rocket would be using HTP, high test peroxide, and kerosene. Now the HTP had got to be decomposed, and apparently such a, shall we say, a combustion chamber had been made or designed and partly developed at Westcott. Westcott was the rocket propulsion establishment in Buckinghamshire. And what had happened, Armstrong Siddeley had received this contract to take, they'd actually come up with what was called the Gamma 1 and the Gamma 2. Gamma 1 was a single chamber, Gamma 2 was 2 chambers, and Westcott's original idea was to have this 2-chambered engine for an interceptor, a mixed power plant, a gas turbine, and a rocket engine. At the time, it would appear that de Havilland's were doing this as they'd started off as a private venture, and they'd got onto the Spectre, which was 1 chamber giving £8,000 thrust, and the Armstrong Siddeley single chamber was 4,000 or 4,100. What they wanted to do was make up a 4-chambered engine known as the Gamma 201, which was to power Black Knight. We'll come back to that later. How do you decompose this HTP? Westcott had come up with the silver-plated nickel gauze, and what they
Sorry, can I I stop you there
Yeah.
for a minute? The statement you made is very interesting. Is that exactly right? Let me go back and ask that question again, because it wasn't Westcott's idea.
I'm going to stop recording for a second.
So
Right,
going back to Dr. Taylor telling me about...
sorry, can I get you to say, because it's easier if this is sort of, Dr. Taylor told me.
right.
Okay,
Yeah.
just do it like that. Okay.
Dr. Taylor told me that we would be building this rocket. It would be 4 chambers. Armstrong Siddeley had got to redesign this gamma chamber. All they did was to send up 6 drawings and a specification. Well, the drawings were for the actual combustion chamber, the turbo pump, and things like that. And the specification was called Westcott S2. And this was the plating technique, the electroplating technique to make the catalyst pack. And it would be coming later in the actual, they were sure this contract was coming, but we wouldn't know till the end of the year. In the meantime, it was hoped to, with this specification, to start experimental plating. It was obvious that Zygmunt Raut was in on this because he'd loaned us an area of his experimental lab to do it. And when the gauzes came, they were 8-inch diameter, and looking at this specification, it was silver cyanide and sodium cyanide. The concentration was 4 grams per litre of silver and 70 grams per litre of free cyanide. So of course I was used to cyanide because I had actually dispensed it in the poison room at Wiley's. It always came in the shape of an egg shape. So, the fact that it was Schedule 1 poison didn't upset me at all. And so we set up this, we'd obviously loaned a plating bath from Zygmunt, and we set it up. It held 20 litres of electrolyte. The anodes consisted of 99% silver. It was a rectangular tank. So the anodes were either side, and in the centre would be the cathode, which was the gauze, the nickel gauze, to be electroplated. And it consisted of a strike, 30-second strike, 5 minutes at 5 amps and 5 minutes at 20 amps. Well, when the gauze came out and was washed, it appeared as and dried, you could wipe the deposit off with your finger. So of course you hadn't got to touch it. In that state, the gauze went into a furnace at 850 degrees, and what we called was sintered for 45 minutes. And it came out snow white. Very rough structure. It was rough silver deposits. And it turned out that you needed something like 70 of these gauzes to make the cat pack. So how was it all pre-cleaned? Well, the only thing that they seemed to do was vapor degrease the gauze and scrub with lime, Sheffield lime, which is a bit of a caustic, abrasive powder. As I say, this seemed sufficient. So having made a pack up, this was sent, or well, I did go to Anstey once a week to collect my pay, a Friday afternoon, and in going I would take a pack, and it was passed on to the research department. Gordon Healy, he was in charge of this, rocket research, because they'd been working for 9 years with liquid oxygen, and suddenly they were going to deal with high test peroxide. So it went, as he was deputy head of the research department, it was handed over to him, and in actual fact they blanked out from the gauzes small packs to do research, rather than use of course the HCP hadn't arrived on site. Well, it did. I actually took the lid off the first 10-gallon drum that arrived at Anstey, because we had no idea what HTP was. The senior managers had actually been to Westcott on a week's course or something like that. But as I say, at my level, what we're going to do with this HTP? Well, as it was a RAF station, it obviously had a firing range for them, to fire 2.2s or a 303. So this is where the drum of HTP went, and we opened it, and it was one Friday afternoon that we first, with pipettes, spotted one of these. Very nice. Now, where are we? I started in March, and by August I was joined by another technician and an apprentice, because they wanted a lot of catalyst gauzes. And what I forget how, I have actually got in my book how many test runs there were on the first chamber. Armstrong Siddeley just stuck to one chamber, and as I say, it was re-engineered before they started building a 4-chamber rocket engine. So Charles Williamson and David Clark as the apprentice joined me, and we were actually making these 8-inch diameter gauzes. The metallurgists weren't too happy, because you can imagine, as Charles had a bath, I had a bath, because the process was taking, shall we say, 12 minutes. These gauzes started hanging, they'd got to dry off. Well, of course, down in the furnace room, as we called it, where the metallurgists had many furnaces, what the hell's going on here? Because they wanted to do their test, So, Taylor came and chatted to Charles Dalton, the chief metallurgist, and said, could we have 2 furnaces at least, because 850 is quite a high temperature. And that's how it went. Well, the contract came through. It was all right, we were doing it on an experimental basis, they've got to think of production. So there was a hut. It wasn't a Nissan hut, it was a proper hut, quite a long one. I have actually got a diagram of the layout of it. They started getting it together for production, and it was, trying to think of the date. I have got it written down, but it was in 56, late 56, that we actually moved over to Anstey and set up the silver plating shop. As I say, it was Charles and myself doing the plating, but when we had it all organised, they employed 2 electroplaters, and we then became the technicians weighing the gauzes before and after, before plating, after sintering, getting some idea of the grams per square inch of silver on the gauzes. May I break off there?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I was just...
Yes, I, with the electroplaters trained, Charles went into the chemistry laboratory, which was over the road in B block. I stayed in the plating shop doing the weight checks, analysing the tanks, because 20 litres, and as you can imagine, a gauze being pulled out allowed to drain so much, but we were losing electrolyte, so the baths had to be adjusted time and time again. And Dr. Taylor suddenly announced that he was leaving. What had happened, no doubt, with his extended college life, he'd married, he'd come to Coventry, he'd bought a house halfway between Parkside and Anstey. He was short of money, and he approached the technical college to do teaching in the evening. He was interviewed by Dr. Smith, who was running the chemistry laboratory, and the fact that he was well into physical chemistry, said this was the lecturer he required, and he announced that he was leaving at the, so he would be starting in the autumn term at the amazing sum of £1,200 a year, which was, I mean, I'd gone there from Wiley's, I was on 550, and I thought the company was very generous in that I was offered 10 guineas a week, plus 1 day off. And by the time, I think I'd only been there a month, and there was a cost of living rise, which took me up to £11 3 shilling a week. So I was very, in fact, just a bit of personal life. When I went to Wiley's after national service, the manager had gone, and we had a Mr. Smith. And Mr. Smith had a very attractive secretary who turned out to be Erica. And so in March 56, we married, okay? But to say that's by the by, Taylor, as I say, was in this situation that he wanted more money, so he left. And they'd employed, he'd employed a BSc, Dennis Bridges was a Coventry lad, BSc, he'd done his national service in the RAF, and we took on Mike Kennedy, who was an MSc. So, you know, really we were quite qualified in having a PhD, a BS, an MSc and a BSc, and of course the technician. But Taylor left, and we were surprised that Dennis Bridges, who started before me, I think he started in January 55, he declined being manager, so this Mike Mike Kennedy took over being manager, and he employed a BSc chemist, Brian Matthews, to run the chem lab, which was actually analysing HTP and that sort of thing. And they decided that the production lab really required a graduate, and Brian Easton came on the scene. And I became very friendly with Brian. We were down there for a good 3 months. I mean, really, he was working at an armament factory to get out of doing national service. He was in the Salvation Army, and he obviously had his views on military service. So he was quite happy to go there. And Brian did quite a lot of sterling work, really. As I say, I was a technician, but having a day off. We started running into problems. Taylor, this rough silver that we were doing and using sodium cyanide, he felt that we'd get a far better product if we used potassium cyanide. Potassium cyanide was something like 98% pure, whereas sodium cyanide was just about 90%. It had impurities in it, and he decided that it needed, we were seeing packs coming back from the test stripped. It needed more silver, and he decided to, he'd called it EP. I mean, I'd been doing these at Parkside, actually. Electroplating smooth for 15 minutes and putting 5 minutes of rough on. But whereas the S2 gauzes under magnification had, they looked like...
yeah.
You can't do it.
No, I can't.
No.
That's why I'm... so I'm just going to stop for a second. Yeah.
Under magnification, whereas the S2 gauze had this dendritic structure, like little fir trees, the EP gauze, EP1 is EP experimental plating. He used or stated he required 15 minutes smooth, followed by 5 minutes rough. And when you looked at that under the microscope, it was more cobwebs, a series of cobwebs. But the engineers accepted it for a while. And then it was known as chugging. The engine was a bit unstable, and caused it. Can we have another pack? I mean, it was quite, because these combustion chambers were bolted together, it was quite easy to change a pack. Can we have another pack? Get another pack out, because they were building up. Same problem. And when Brian Easton joined us, he was explaining to Sid Allen. Sid Allen was the chief engineer. Sid Allen had 9 years earlier, Sid Allen was the combustion engineer, and it was he who took charge of the early work on Snarler, and obviously carried on with Screamer, and he was actually in charge of us still while we were doing this. And he decided, let's go back to Westcott S2 gauzes, which we did. But it wasn't giving the life and decomposition as expected. I mean, decomposition, say at 98%, when once it got down to 90% decomposition, the pack was called no good. So Brian Easton sort of looked at it and he said, well, why not put the smooth plate, we go back to sodium cyanide, but we use a more conventional composition, whereas we were using this from 4 grams per litre going up to 14 grams per litre. As the bath was worked and you plated a pack, say 60 or 70 gauzes, this silver had gone up in concentration, the cyanide had gone down, and you were getting towards more normal plating rather than rough plating. So he decided to plate for 15 minutes in a silver bath containing 20 to 22 grams per litre and similar type of cyanide. So you got really smooth plating, and then not putting 5 minutes on, 1 minute. So he was actually talking with the development engineer, and it was the development engineer who said he thought that the HTP should enter the pack and not be met by this massive rough silver, and shall we say have a bit of a blow pack, you know, to give in this instance. Let the HTP get into the pack where decomposition would start. And then, of course, with time, we found that, you know, a catalyst should not participate in the actual chemical reaction. But what was happening, as the HTP went in, it knocked off a lot of these fir trees, but it also dissolved them. And say halfway down the pack, it would change from the liquid phase to the gas phase. Now in the gas phase, you're looking at superheated steam. The H2O2 decomposes into H2O water plus O. And this worked out to be 60% water, 40% oxygen, but the decomposition temperature was 600 degrees, superheated steam. So gradually, as the pack was used, you had this effect of the interface moving down. But when it got to the gas phase, the dissolved silver deposited. And it was amazing that this deposited silver was far more active than the silver that we'd actually plated. But high pressure drops, you can imagine that I should have said, we were dealing with 20 mesh gauze. That means there's 20 wires per inch, okay? Weft and warp, you've got 20 wires one way, 20 wires the next. So once you had got into a bath where the S2 bath was at the top of its range, 12 grams or 14 grams per litre, you were getting a lot of silver. So initially, when you'd got this cap pack, you didn't assemble it as it had been plated. You spread it out 5 times, something like that. Well, going back to this business with the development engineer, he took this pack away, and we'd actually called these smooth gauzes with 1 minute of rough plating EPS1, okay? And a pack now consisted of 20 EPS1 gauzes and 48 S2 gauzes. made. It was called a BK pack. Later I can tell you how much silver there was actually on the gauzes. I think it worked out something like 12% of the pack was silver and the rest was nickel gauze. Can I have a rest?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's stop for a second. Just have a chat. Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to just put the paper down? Just that's it, and then okay. So just say that again.
I'm sorry. Where did we get to?
You were saying
some dates for the first gamma and dates contract, and that Stentor was only January 56. Did you say?
Right. Sorry, hold on a minute.
Okay,
You're not.
No, I'll stop.
Well,
I'll stop
let me
again.
try and put that into context then. If you want to introduce gamma, who was the project manager for that project? Was David?
Let's record this. Okay. So he came down and said we've got a problem. Yeah.
September 58 was the first firing of a black night at Woomera. There was great, it was announced at the end of Farnborough Week. Took the press, the technical press, really by surprise. We'd gone up to 300 odd miles. Britain's in space. It was great, and of course they got nothing to show. Only a few models of what Black Knight. Well, what was Black Knight doing? Well, it was all secret, because what it was the forerunner of Blue Streak. The British scientists had no idea what happened to the rocket when it re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. It was going to have an atomic bomb on it. Okay, so we'd got to have the right head. And Black Knight was used to try out different materials for the re-entry of the rocket into the Earth's atmosphere. As I say, the technical press, what's Armstrong Siddeley? And it was told that it worked on peroxide and kerosene. What's Armstrong Siddeley doing with this? They're on oxygen and kerosene, seemed most odd. But anyway, we were quite happy. We celebrated down at the Bull in Brinklow.
Do you mind if I put that over there? It's just the fact that when you bang the...
Yeah.
You just put... It's actually...
But within months, the development engineers were coming back to us saying, what's happening? And of course, we go back to Snarler and Screamer. The way combustion chambers had been made was with low alloy steel, which were chrome plated. Well, to get a chrome plate on, you've got to have nickel plate first, okay, nickel plate intermediate. So when you look at photographs of Gamma 201, you can see the chambers are shining with chromium plate, okay? But when you think that the chambers were machined out of 8-inch bar, okay, it was once it had its shape, it was so easy to put the whole lot in the plating bath, okay? And of course what was happening is that as they ran the cap packs, there was residual HTP in the chamber, okay, which obviously with the heat and whatnot decomposed, but it left reactions that had occurred with the chromium plate. So that when once it was switched on to run again, in would come the fresh HTP, dissolve what had been deposited, comes round, goes through the cap pack and poisoned it. Well, Arthur Broomfield, I'd cut a piece out, put it in. It sat there for something like 2 minutes, bubbling, because once this chromium ions were washed off, it went away, So of course they had to get the whole stock and strip off the chromium on the inside The chromium was left on the inner chamber, but not on the other side. Okay, big problem. That occurred in 59. Well then, we're not on camera, are we?
Yeah, I'm still recording. Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah.
Well, we were then still...
Can you put the paper down?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, it's a bit,
Yeah.
was it rustling about? Yeah.
So we were still having stripping problems, and Brian Easton said, you know, it needs a better key. So we went over to acid etching, 15 seconds in an acid etching. The platers didn't like it. We got fumes, so we had to, where the bath was, we had to rig up an extractor fan, you know, to get it away. It seemed to work for a while, but they didn't like it, this playing about with so much fuming acid around. So we went to the metallurgist. We went to but I must say that the rocket chemistry laboratory did not have a metallurgist. It had been agreed early on that the chemists who were to be involved with the rockets was to give 100% support to the rocket and not get involved in gas turbines or anything like that. But for metallurgical problems, they were to go to Parkside. So we had Charles Dalton come over, and he looked at them and he said, I think the answer, the pre-treatment, it should be abrasive blasted with alumina, 120, 220 grade. So as the gauzy had come in looking shiny nickel, by giving them an abrasive blast all over both sides, it was matte grey. And this worked. This, with the silver strike, there was better adhesion of the silver plate. Sadly, Brian Easton's time was up. 3 years had gone by and he wished to go back to London from where he'd come from. He went back with nervous dyspepsia. Oh yes, it had got through to him. You know, all this problem, one thing and another, pre-treatment of gauzes, you plated to the spec, you had stripping, what else was wrong? So the other factor that was coming into it was a change from electrolytic produced high test peroxide to AO peroxide, auto-oxidation. And although the specification looked the same, there was this carbon content, 300 parts per million. And certainly the development people were not happy when we went over to it. In fact, Regelow insisted that before a run, of course you'd got a tank and the test cell was some distance away, so you'd got quite a run. They'd got to run off so much before they actually tested the pack. America had proved the fact that your pack life was reduced by half. In fact, I think some companies banned it altogether, AO peroxide. How we couldn't do anything about it. In fact, Gordon Healy had done quite a bit of work on the first. The initial production was something like 5,000 gallon, and it had been distributed. I think Westcott had some and all that sort of thing. And we tried it first of all in 50 test house, which was the research test house, and then it went to 60 test. And 60 tests is the horizontal bed where you could actually test the small chamber and the large chamber of the stentor. But once it was married to the engine and both chambers fired, it made such a noise that they decided that all this should be done down at Westcott. And so we had 63 test houses down at Westcott, where 101 development engines were tested, and later 60 production engines. Stentor went into the Blue Steel standoff bomb. That went into service with 5 squadrons. So, and that becomes another story. The ground staff who worked on these engines, of course an engine could be on standby for 30 days when it was come off, the HTP taken out, because HTP was not a storable propellant. Although you could have, pickled and passivated components and parts, it decomposed slowly. You couldn't, shall we say, put a plug on it. It had to be ventilated a bit, okay? So this, in the meantime, with Brian going, we employed someone who was associate of the Royal Institute of Chemists, and he took over the running. I'd had quite enough of silver plating and requested to go into the laboratory and actually work with HTP, initially analysing it. And of course, with, going back to 60 tests, on all these runs, in would come a sample and they wanted to know the strength, because HTP was supplied 85 to 87%. And the lorries kept coming, and although there was, of course these were 5,000 gallon tanks, although the pumping in of the HTP created quite a lot of agitation, you couldn't always guarantee that it was thoroughly mixed. And so development said that before and after a run, a sample would be taken and taken to the laboratory. So the sample bottles used to be piled up, to have, and again, this is where we differed with some people. How do you measure the strength of peroxide? For normal compatibility testing of materials, where you have a 6-inch test tube and a small sample, as that decomposes, you could take 1 drop and put it on a refractometer, read its refractive index, and then from a graph read off the concentration. But it could at times be 0.5% or 1% out. The RAF, we'd tried it, the RAF used hydrometer, but again, when we tried it, and the problem with the hydrometer, you've got to have a measuring flask, the height of a hydrometer, and to float, if you had a too narrow, you remember the litre measuring, I was going to say bottles, they're not bottles, are they? But there was always a tendency for the hydrometer to drift, and that would interfere with the surface tension. So we went over to weighing 50 mil of HTP, and we actually standardised at 25 degrees centigrade. So you would actually, you had a bath at 25 degrees centigrade plus or minus 0.1 of a degree. These were quite accurate. Your 50 mil flask, A grade, we went there, I think it was called a Renault flask, where you go from the flask to a narrow neck, but we went to an even narrower neck in order to get the meniscus sitting exactly on the line. A lot of this was to please Reg Lowe, the development engineer. With the stenter, he'd come up with the mixture ratio control valve. In theory, the required amount of peroxide to kerosene was 8.2 parts of peroxide to 1 of kerosene. This is one disadvantage of peroxide. Although it's great to be a cooling agent for the combustion chamber, you do require a lot of peroxide for the... And he'd come up with this pressure ratio control valve, and this is why he was adamant that he wanted the correct strength of peroxide, which was fair enough when he was dealing with flows of pounds per second, etc. I'm trying to think, how did I get onto that? Oh yeah, the change to AO peroxide. So we had to do far more analysis of the HTP to find out what the whether it was coming up to this 300 parts per million or was it 150. But it was something we had to live with for a long time, and it wasn't until 68 that we found that there was a radical that hadn't been considered, and that was silica. Laporte, who supplied us, had this huge plant up at Warrington built to produce AO. And of course AO was cheaper than the electrolytic process. I mean, that's the reason they went. What I don't know is what HTP they used at Sanders Row on the Isle of Wight. What HTP did they use in Australia? It's never filtered through as to what they actually used. Whether Laporte shipped it out to them, we don't know. I don't know anyway. The fellow who came in, the Associate Royal Institute of Chemists, the ARIC, John Walton, he got involved, and he himself thought that there should be, although we were putting on 15 minutes of smooth coat, he felt that there should be far more. And so I went back down there many times to plate a pack myself to verify that what the platers were plating was satisfactory, you know. But a backup was required, as, you know, is there anything wrong? And I plated and found that it failed. So we were certainly in trouble at times. And the committee was set up, the Catalyst Pack Committee. I don't know, perhaps it met monthly or bi-monthly, but there was research engineer there and a development engineer, experimental engineer, a chemist, you know, going over. And it was a great, I mean, at one time with stenter production, we had a night shift as well. So, you know, there was 4 platers making these. Were they going to sleep? Were they leaving it on longer? We actually, we thermostated the baths at 25 degrees. You might think this is odd. Why didn't you use them at room temperature? But, you know, if you had a heavy frost, the room was cold. Obviously, it didn't apply if the night shift had been on, but you could go in with the bath very cold and therefore not so much weight. So they were thermostated at 25 degrees. Because we'd found blocking was quite a problem on the edges. So we had polythene shields made so that you actually fitted the gauze, and it had this shield, and so the current was concentrated on the gauze itself. You think, well, how did we handle this? But you've got to remember that an 8-inch gauze had a 1.5-inch hole in the centre, because through the pack came the kerosene supply. With the catalyst pack, it decomposed into superheated steam at a certain pressure that would allow the kerosene to enter. And of course, being at 625 degrees, it ignited immediately, what we call thermal ignition. So, as I say, going back to this problem of the ratio of anode to cathode, he studied it and said he thought it would be better to have a much larger thickness of smooth plate, and really we hadn't thought of the obvious. And it was only it wasn't until I was in the Heritage Trust that I first saw a de Havilland catalyst pack. I said to John that we would go back to de Havilland and how they came into it, but they were whereas Sidley's had started in 19. The early discussions were 45, but they actually started experimental work in 1946. Well, de Havilland started in 1946 with Val Cleaver, and he just did, he read a lot. He read a lot of German literature before he entered into peroxide. And in actual fact, his first peroxide came from Germany. He used a German cold motor. But as I say, it was not until years later that, and I first saw a de Havilland catalyst pack when we cleaned a de Havilland Spectre up at Derby in Heritage Trust. And I couldn't believe their cat pack. Admitted it was putting, they were having £8,000 thrust from it, whereas we were only having £4,100 thrust at that stage. They had varied meshes through the pack. They started with 20 mesh, dropped to 18 mesh, 16 mesh, 12 mesh. So no wonder they didn't get the peaks, the blocking, you know. And the penny hadn't dropped. And yet we were actually using 16 mesh for the large combustion chamber on Stentor. But at that stage, we were keeping to 20 mesh. The BK packs, as I say, what engines they'd been used in, the reliability was wonderful, really. Of 22 Black Knight launches, they were all successful. I won't say the experiments that they carried were successful, but they went to the heights that were requested of them. Stentor, well, excuse me. There it is, would you mind?
Okay.
Hello.
And the Carre group and just one or two extras like that.
Yeah. Should we do that, and then we'll do the
Pickies,
yeah, we'll do the pickies, and then
that's it.
yeah. Okay. So
Trip to West, he enjoys this one.
yeah.
No, with our problems that we had with the cat packs, we couldn't say that any engine failed. Of the 101 development engines which were made for blue steel, 40 were fired at Woomera. Seemed to no problems to say that it cut out midway. I think you're aware that the in these early days it was carried by the in service it was the Victor and the Vulcan, but at this stage it was the Valiant that carried the bomb. It was dropped at about 50,000 feet, and it dropped for 3 seconds. Both end chambers fired, and it went up to 70,000 feet, at which stage the large chamber shut down and the missile cruised on its small chamber for something like 100 miles and then dropped down on its target at 1,000 miles per hour. But I say, with all these tests, there was never a complaint that it had stopped halfway in its flight or anything like that. Back to the problem, we couldn't understand it, and I went with Dennis Bridges down to Maggs and Sutton. They were both doctors, I believe, and explained what we'd done and how we'd tried to correct things, and they suddenly said it was a bad batch of peroxide. No real explanation. Who, as you know, Westcott was the centre for research, and we went to them always for advice. So, we didn't understand it, and back we went and carried on plating. This committee had decided that it was best to take the production from the platers and go out, spread them out. Although they were at this sort of relatively constant weight, but to distribute them, make up 5 packs and send 1 pack to 61 test house, which was the auxiliary test house, and actually run it. And if it was satisfactory, all 4 were allowed to go into production engine. If it failed, all 4 packs were rejected. Of course you think, well, what are you doing with all these rejected packs? Because we were deplating them, we had lots of cyanide. And in actual fact, we reclaimed the silver and sent it back to Engelhard Industries. Initially, we handed it over to heat treatment of turbine blades and that sort of thing was carried out at Anstey number 4 shop, and we went over there and they had actually, with the furnaces at the silver melts at 981 or something like that, they kindly melted what we'd got down into small bars, and they were sent back to Engelhard Industries who reprocessed them, that sort of thing. Cyanide itself, because you'd get to a stage where you had got all this silver dropping off the cathodes, the steel cathodes, but you're still left with a silver cyanide solution. And we came up with powdered zinc, sprinkled powdered zinc into it, and you know what happens chemically. Down would come the silver, and as I say, then decant off the cyanide, and that was actually destroyed by hypochlorite over at the test site to harmless cyanate. I mean, that was a job in itself, in that If they added it too quick, it'd boil over. It happened one afternoon, an autumn afternoon, and they'd just brought in an engine off test. There was a little fitting shop over there. They had to do things to the engine before and after test. And they'd got the door open. This, like being in the trenches during World War One, this chlorine cloud went into their fitting shop, came out coughing and sneezing. Oh dear, safety officer arrived, and the laboratory had to do this on a Saturday. So it was a bit of overtime for it. Now then, one of the problems that appeared was that the gauze had been sintered, and 2 or 3 wires, the silver was cracking off. What had happened here? So, of course, we didn't have any, all our analysis was wet analysis. Found out that, we've got an iron wire here. And then on another, we detected, it worked out that it was a monowire. So the gauze, which came in, I should say, 3 foot high and 12 foot long, what suddenly happened? And so we had to start doing analysis on incoming gauze. Well, the way we did it, I came up with the idea in the electrograph. What they actually did, weft and wore, they'd cut perhaps a 3/4 inch off the weft and all the way along the warp. So in would come, a round mass of nickel with something tied on, which was the end. And I used that as the anode, filter paper soaked in ammonium chloride, and an aluminium bar. And we just did it like that and moved it through and checked. And so suddenly we found a mass of this, and the stock had to go back to wherever it came from. But again, that was something that came in out of the blue. What other problems occurred? No, I think we got to the stage where we'd got to building gamma 8 and gamma 2, and they suddenly ran into this problem of late ignition on some of the chambers, and we had this almighty bang. An investigation, and Reglow came down, the development engineer. We went through all of the reports that had been written, and he came up with the idea, let's go over to 16 mesh and put far more silver on. And I'll give you that specification later as to what we did. It didn't hold up Black Arrow program because Black Arrow was running a bit late anyway, but it took 4 months to sort that out. Now another interesting thing that what I had was that we'd supplied the PR-37 to improve the Jindovic drone. Had a Armstrong Siddeley Viper engine in it, but at 40,000 feet it wasn't behaving at all right, and they decided that a rocket might help it at that height. It was known as the PR-37. Very small chamber. The thrust, I forget now, 50 pound going up to something or other. Quite small really, and they decided it wouldn't need a turbo pump. You'd use compressed gas to empty the tanks to get the propellants to the combustion chamber. Very complicated tank, made out of FV520, which is a chromium-based steel, and because of the centre of gravity, it had to empty in the end first, going inwards. So there was complicated pipe work inside this tank, and when it arrived, we were absolutely baffled and decided that we'd got to have an ultrasonic tank to clean it internally. So it was pickled and passivated. Well, when it came to the passivation, we couldn't believe it. It was coming out almost the colour of potassium permanganate solution. All this chromium. Oh dear, we were going to be in trouble. So we set up a peristaltic pump and pumped HTP through, round and round. When it got to a certain pink level of chromium, we changed. There was quite a bit of... I haven't actually mentioned the pickling and passivating part of the rocket department. This was over at the test site. Anything coming into contact with HTP had got to be surface treated, and it was called pickling and passivating. We pickled with 50% nitric acid and passivated with peroxide. Having done this process and washed in demin water, was a number of demineralizers we had, and this huge tank of demineralized water, and a big oven to dry the parts, cooled, and all parts were wrapped in polythene bags, and then sent over to the shops a quarter of a mile away for build. So, you know, cleanliness was the important part of the build of the engine. So obviously their tanks had to be analysed and checked. I'm trying to think. Oh yes, going back to this tank. When, of course, it was going to cost a lot of money. The tank was 8 feet long. It was going to cost a lot of money. I mean, we actually went to Zygmunt Rout to see, back at Parkside, to see whether they'd got involved. And when we said what we were doing, in his Polish accent, he said, "A very bold decision." But it did the job. We did it, and but by the time, I mean, even David Andrews said, the time it took for us to get this little chamber right, Viper had developed a system whereby it was satisfactory at 40,000 feet. But it was tried. It was fired, and they did various experiments at it out in Woomera, but it never went into production. I think that's about it, really.
Westcott?
Well, we were going down there occasionally.
What do you remember from Westcott?
How
many times did you go?
Not all that at the moment, because each day development engineers went down there to run the Stentor. Oh, and of course the BS 605. Now this was a two-chamber engine which went into the Buccaneer. It was a private venture by Hawker Siddeley, and they were selling these Buccaneers to South Africa, which, as you know, have these high altitude airfields. And with a fully loaded Buccaneer, they thought that an 8,000 pound thrust would help them to get airborne. But you never see a 605 as an engine, because it was built into the aircraft. Obviously the parts were assembled, and they decided the best place for this was Westcott. They had the rear of a Buccaneer. I don't know whether you ever saw it, but the two chambers were put in there. And of course what was quite neat about the 605 was that it was lowered for takeoff, and as soon as they got to the required altitude, the chambers retracted, and so you got the aerodynamic shape of the aircraft as required. Because it had to have an HTP tank and kerosene tank, well, I don't know how they tapped the kerosene off, and what was known as the valve tray. The valve tray was worked by nitrogen gas. The whole business with an HTP engine was that when one part was functioning right, it allowed another part to function, and that allowed, so it was a chain effect. So, as I say, we had engineers going, I won't say, probably daily. There was, down there was, of course we'd gone through the phases, Armstrong Siddeley, Bristol Siddeley, Rolls-Royce. We had some, I think they actually lived down there, certainly for 5 days of the week, but as on certain productions, they perhaps did a 7-day week at times. So with regards to the laboratory, we'd go to Westcott, have words with Sutton, or it was generally Sutton, and also
Derek
to
Sutton?
pardon?
Derek Sutton.
Yes,
Yes.
Dr. Sutton, yeah. Of course, we actually spoke to experimental engineers who were down there. We thought their pay structure was excellent. You could become a senior and a principal, and it was quite good. No, but when we went to actually see our foreman, who was Morris Barrett down there, he had the odd problem. But with regards to samples, the engineers would come back at obviously night. Next morning they would drop their samples and off they go. So we had a couple of girls who were on testing the strength of these samples and that sort of thing. Now I got to 1968 and I didn't really get involved with these new cat packs, which were now called the BA. I was suddenly involved in packaged propellants. David Andrews, I've got quite a few reports to show you, but I wasn't aware of what was going on. Well, none of us were what was going on, but they could see that the life of HTP engines were coming to an end. Black Arrow, although it was started in '64, it was so much money allowed per quarter to do so much. No, the Labour government wouldn't cancel it, and the Tory wouldn't, and we had the Ted Heath, Wilson governments as they were. And of course in the end it was Ted Heath's government who cancelled Black Arrow. But I think senior management could see that, we hadn't come up with any new technology really from about mid-1960, and they looked towards packaged propellants. And it is odd that this is what happened to de Havilland. De Havilland had quite a good run building first the Sprite, then the Super Sprite, then the Spectre, unfortunately, the Spectre, which went in the SR-53 and was going to go into the SR-177, were cancelled one after the other. I mean, I don't know, the SR-53, it had, you know, quite a few flights, but they had two prototypes. The first was very good, but the second prototype, something went wrong on a takeoff. It ran out around and blew up because it had all the peroxide on it. Napiers, they were into HTP very early on. In fact, they made rocket engines for Westcott. And they'd went into, I can't think of the aircraft, Canberra. They called it the Scorpion. Well, they had the NRE-11, the NRE-17s. These were small HTP motors for missiles. But they went into an aircraft engine called the Scorpion, and they came up with the double Scorpion. And they actually, I can't give you the date now, but they actually had the all-time record at 70-odd thousand feet going up with their rocket. And some of their early engines had experience over in Easter Island, where they were letting off atomic bombs, and they were way up high, sampling the cloud mass and that sort of thing. But they came back to this country, and again they got the record for the highest bailout of an aircraft. Somewhere in Derbyshire, in the Derbyshire Dales, something went wrong, and it looked as though it was the rocket engine malfunction. So really, with regards to aircraft, HTP engines were out, and yet Bristol Siddeley had come up with the B605. And as far as we know, we never did get to know the utilisation of the 605, because by the time it went into service, although we were working on it, I think in '64 initially, because of the apartheid problem, and especially the Labour government not wanting armaments to go to South Africa, it was delayed, and I don't think it went till about 1970. So the peroxide section of the rocket department closed on the 31st of December 1971. Arthur Broomfield, as manager, stayed on. Both he, David Andrews, and Arthur Broomfield had gone out to Africa. And as far as we know, the engines were used, certainly at air shows. I'm hoping one day that we will get a bit of information, because I read in the press about 18 months ago, no, a year ago, that they'd got a museum of jet engines, etc., and rocket engines. And one of the Buccaneers has actually moved into the museum that had a rocket in it. So we may be able to see what's in the logbook. You don't know. But as far as we were concerned, the 605 was a success. Well then, in my own career, I had a letter from Val Cleaver to say that Black Arrow was coming to an end, and I would hear from the personnel department. So all right, in 3 months' time I had this letter to say that my services would be terminated on the 31st of December. On the other hand, I could looked to see what was on the notice board with regards to job vacancies. There were not many, because in 1971, as you know, Rolls-Royce went to the wall. It became nationalised. It became Rolls-Royce 1971 Limited. Something like 4,500 employees were made redundant up at Derby. Product support graphics, which was at Anstey, quite a large department. They'd closed down and gone to Derby. So obviously a few there had taken jobs, so there was not much really going with regards to jobs. I wasn't in, I was a bit concerned because we'd come here in 1968. I'd taken on, I don't know, £3,500 mortgage. My wife had a baby. We'd got two daughters aged 12 and 10. We came here. This is a bit of amusing. This house was given for the use of flame from the sea, North Sea gas. Okay, and North Sea gas hadn't arrived here in Nuneaton. We were still on coal gas, so the appliances had to be, new jets fitted and all that sort of thing. That was a gas fire, and the central heating was ducted air, which my wife didn't like at all, because we had the normal water heating radiators, and we have decided, it was a cool house. So the result was she was having a baby in 9 months' time. So of course, she had been working part-time, I thought, oh dear, I need a job. Well, of course, I'd worked with catalysts, and I did apply to Jaguar and Chrysler, who were in Coventry. As you know, catalysts for cars were on the menu. But while waiting, I did get letters for an interview, but in the meantime, one had come up in the service department. They wanted a technical assistant. And I read the specification, the job description and whatnot, and had an interview, and it was amazing what was going on, because in industrial and marine it had taken off. The Avon engine was being used for peak lopping in this country, and for pumping gas in Canada. The Trans-Canada pipeline is also in this country was the Olympus, and the director of product support was not happy with the reporting system. Aircraft-wise, had always had a summary of operations, something that came out once a month to say what was flying and not. Aircraft on ground, no spare engines, flap, flap, flap. So he came up with something called the product support brief, product support brief. He just wanted 2 pages. He didn't want pages and pages of different things. And what it broke down to was the customer was with the most engines would be the leader, and then following it was the, shall we say, the Avons as a whole, all industrial Avons, comparing the shall we say, the best customer with the rest. And of course we'd got Avon, Olympus, Proteus, Tyne, and it was a lady who actually was in there doing tech records, as they called it. And they said, well, we want you as a technical assistant, you know, doing different things, but we want you to look after tech records. And you know, I was looking. He showed me, you know, a summary of operations and a product support brief. And he said, well, apart from this, we want graphs of 12-month moving average of removals, whether it was for repair or overhaul, mean time between shop visits, cost per fired hour. You think, well, what's you know? Well, a new engine is sold. It goes into the field. It's perhaps repaired, eventually failed. It's overhauled. Comes out as a new engine. So, what does it cost for it to be in the field to have another repair? Frightening. And so this is how I busied myself for something like 7 years. And you get to the stage where it's statistics and lies. I was giving two sides actually, one to engineering, showing what the faults were, and one to the customer where they were saying, well, everything's fine. Yes, you've had a bit of a dip here, but we've come up with a modification that's cured that. As I'm on camera, perhaps I shouldn't say it, but I think our customers helped us to develop many of the engines. I mean, we started off with the Olympus, A-rated at 17.5 megawatts. It went to B-rated, 20 megawatts, and then the C-rated was at 30 megawatts, so quite a lot of effort put into it. The Avon, the trusty, I've always said that the Avon was the bread and butter of the industrial and marine. They, because it was still on production, up at East Kilbride, the they kept, for spares, it was always reckoned on a 12-week turnaround time, whether it was a repair or an overhaul, it had to fit in 12. I'm afraid the Olympus was 24 weeks, had many problems. One of the big problems with the Olympus was HP turbine blade failures. But spares were held at Didcot Power Station, so I never saw an Avon, really. They were always sent to East Kilbride, where they did keep with this 12-week turnaround time. And I saw a lot of the Olympus. But as I say, you know, I not only fed the... I landed up with 3 telephones on my desk. There was the internal, the external one, and the one to the product support director. I don't understand it. I've got 120 staff in service department. Why can't I have what I want? Well, in actual fact, my manager, he, you know, he was worried to death at times. And I used to say, well, what does he want? You know, he's asking for a graph. So I, you know, I'd go cap in hand to his office and say, no, I've got this. How do you want it presented? You know, and so I got on quite well with it. Because one, I'm sorry, I've gone off rockets, haven't I? But one engine, the Proteus, was in hovercraft. And it so happened that Gordon Healy, he'd taken a job on the other side, as we call it. He was certification engineer, and the hovercraft came under CAA jurisdiction, and it was a modular engine, you know, so it went out with a logbook and nothing came back. that went out to decipher a Proteus logbook. I was very lucky in that the foreman on Proteus, his wife had died, and he'd got a bit of spare time and he'd help me out at night. But when you looked at the logbook, Hoboloid especially, they kept it going. Now, British Rail, yes, they had the short run, Dover to Calais, but Hoboloid was from Margate to Boulogne, and they were really on top of maintenance and turning round, taking a compressor off one and putting another compressor on another, and that sort of thing. So suddenly there was a job on the board a chemist wanted. I looked at it, and of course I knew who was running the place, so on my way back from lunch I called in at the laboratory. It was now the Materials Laboratory, IMD, and Tony Holloway, who was deputy chief metallurgist, was running it. And he said, "Good heavens, what are you doing here?" I said, "I've seen this advert on the board. What is it?" Oh. I said, "Who's left?" Oh, he said, "Trevor's left. He's gone to work for Ardrox. He's gone repping." I said, "Oh, I see. So what does the job involve?" So he took me into the lab and showed me different things. He said, "You better have an official interview." So I did, and the one stumbling block, I mean, I was a section leader. I think I was on about 2,500 a year by now. I'd gone back to, because when I got made redundant, shall we say, I went from section leader down to the TAS union rate, basic, because I was an unknown quantity. But within a month, within a year, I'd got back up to the salary that I was used to. And as I say, I'd done quite well in the service department, salary-wise. So I said, well, I think the stumbling block's going to be my salary. But anyway, we went through it, and he said, "I'll take you on with your salary." So then I put a white coat on again. And that's, I don't forget how many years now, but I was there until I retired at the age of 60. And it was quite good. Eventually the materials laboratory was split up into engineering and manufacturing, and I went manufacturing. And of course, Anstey, you're aware that Rolls-Royce had the aero division, civil at Derby, the aero division at Bristol, so it was called BED, and IMD, Industrial Marine Division, at Anstey. And of course, when I went into the Anstey, the materials laboratory, I was aware that IMD did not repair and overhaul their own engines. Although they sold them, when they came back to the factory, they were subcontracted to BED. It was BED who was really running the factory with regards to repair and overhaul. And as I was doing, initially I started analysing all the cleaning solutions, the Ardrox 185, the Ardrox 188, you know, and all this business. I had been aware when I was doing in the service the cost per fired hour, that how IMD earned their money, they subcontracted it, and where it came to spares being added, the cost of the spares was shared between IMD and BED. So when I went back into the lab and started analysing and whatnot, what do I do with it? Send it to Parkside. Really, I came under a manager at Parkside, and I was being paid by Parkside. I wasn't aware of this straight away, but so when it came, as you know, Leavesden closed down, then Parkside closed down. Parkside had become, I can't think of the word, but it was all production centre. They were not building engines or anything like that. They were doing the blades and the discs and all sorts of things. So when it came to the closure of Parkside, I was on their list. I was 60, and I mean, every time that you had, I mean, they were looking to run down the place, no doubt about it, before they closed it. But every time you got a cost of living rise or a merit rise, the computer would roll and they would tell you what your severance pay would be and your pension. So as I say, it got to the closure of Parkside, and Erica and I looked one weekend at these figures, and I said, I think I might as well go. You know, we worked it out, and I went in on the Monday morning and said, I'm going to go for severance. And they, what? I mean, they were looking for a reduction in lab staff, and my manager wasn't at all happy, but he'd got to meet his targets. And so I left in, no, it was past my birthday, June, God, it's terrible when you forget how old you are. 82 now, Alan. So, but I had a great time, whether I was in the rocket laboratory, the service department, the materials laboratory. My days were different. Every day was different. I mean, when it came to the Anstey laboratory, IMD, we were equipped with bikes. We were on call. Could a big site, you know, but foreman in one shop would want you, and a foreman in another, and you come back with a bit of sample or something or other. And as I say, I just, Erica has always said, oh, he used to go off with a smile on his face every day. So there we are.
Going to work like that.
Audio.
So this is the Bristol Siddeley News, Thursday, September 24th, 1964.
But when you look at this, they cut in Bristol City.
Yes, of course.
So, you actually
And it doesn't sound very nice, actually, does it? Wow. Okay. I mean, that flew once, didn't it? Like that.
quite, yeah.
And with
2
Hawker
years.
Siddeley's?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if I said Spartan 1, would you know what I was talking about?
I think so.
Okay, because
It was
an air-to-air
inhibited
Earthner. Yeah.
red field. Had it developed,
Yeah.
and he came back, he said, the lighting's not right. We had to take all that up to the studio.
Yes, because there is some information that Thiacole's passed
Yes.
data to, because the first ball pup.
Okay, so this is Bristol Siddeley Gamma 301 flight clearance test
Yes,
data.
yeah.
And the dates are 15th to the 9th, 1961 to 10th of the...
Yes.
Sorry, can you just... Yeah, let's just...
That's it.
10th and 10th, 1961.
Yes, because, you know, it had to, I don't know, I think they fired morning and afternoon. This is a bit better. Because he's quoting references like
Yes.
de Havilland, Ken Page and Neat.
Wilf Neat, yeah.
Wilf Neat,
Yeah.
that's it. And fair enough. And Bristol have been, the Heritage Trust Bristol have been messed about a bit in having a exhibition room. They were in an old test house, you know, and all that sort of thing.
What, at Filton or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they had to offload. And with John's interest, we've now got a little workshop at Anstey, but when it closed down, they moved that much production stuff to Anstey that there was no room for the Heritage Trust to go.
Okay.
And they were all upset, and they had Sir Ralph Robbins come and look at the Coventry collection, and he was taken back. So 3 of us go down, and we go down into the basement, you know, rows and rows of shelving. Well, this is Sidley's, and I said, what? All these? So we opened a few, and Ron that is what it looks like at the moment up at HTP engine.
Okay. Yeah.
Here's the key.
Let me ask a question about RZ1 then. Charlie Martin doesn't mention RZ2 at all as being fired at Westcott.
I'd have to go
You know, Charlie Martin's Blue Streak.
to a Val Cleaver paper.
If you could, please. Because
I better
John's
make
got
a
this
note.
Rolls Royce report that says RZ2, mentions RZ2
Yeah.
on Westcott. And I'm saying, okay, you know, people write reports, but, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this, you know, made it.
Unique, really, didn't it?
Yeah,
Where was
yeah.
this?
This is Anstey.
This was up at Anstey, was it? Can't
Yeah.
they demolished that?
Yeah.
Is everything gone at Anstey now?
Not everything, but
Okay.
all the rocket buildings gone. Well, the test houses went in 1990.
Did they?
Yeah.
Okay.
And pulled behind. Yeah. So, what we had in.
So Gordon Healy was in here?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. He had his own office.
Yeah.
A very nice fellow,
Yeah.
Gordon.
Yeah.
So with regards to,
You know, Gordon wrote a firing procedure. We wrote a firing procedure for Stentor, did you?
specifications that
Yeah.
had to follow. Oh, that's interesting. Have you heard of the Star Chaser,
Yes.
Anthony Haynes? He had 4.
I should stay away from Star Chaser.
Well, this is what.
his work at Westcott.
Yeah.
And he was trying to get a Cosworth engine to run a pump for him, and nobody was.
Is this car thing? This,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Thrust 2 or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
But nobody was interested in the rocket engine. They just wanted to see this Cosworth. It made a dickens of a noise.
Yeah. 100 litre and 200 litre baths. These for the Stentor large engine.
Yes.
Vapour degreaser, a sink
Oh,
with quite big
must.
board because
Yeah.
it was scrubbed initially with lime.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the Ardrox 18